Welcome back to Power and Statecraft. Today is Tuesday, March 10th, 2026, and the Donroe Doctrine has officially entered its most brutal phase, the hydraulic siege. Overnight, the epic fury war shifted from energy targets to the very substance of life itself. Reports are surfacing of devastating drone and missile strikes targeting the Jubail desalination complex in Saudi Arabia and the Jebel Ali facilities in the UAE. We are moving past the headlines to analyze the strategic logic of Mojtaba Khamenei's water war and why the Trump administration's response is a total transformation of U.S. power in the Middle East. For decades, statecraft in the Persian Gulf was about oil, but in 2026, oil is the secondary target. The Mojtaba Doctrine recognizes that while the U.S. can weather high oil prices, our Gulf allies cannot weather a lack of drinking water. In parched desert nations where 70% to 90% of potable water comes from desalination, these facilities are the ultimate strategic vulnerability. By targeting water, Tehran is attempting to trigger a massive evacuation scenario. If Jubail or Jebel Ali are offline for more than 72 hours, the social order of the GCC begins to collapse. This is naked statecraft, using the threat of a humanitarian catastrophe to force the U.S. and Israel into a ceasefire, the $45 billion supplemental and the cost of choice. In Washington, the response is a show of fiscal and military force. The Trump administration has officially sent an emergency $45 billion war supplemental request to Congress this morning. This is not just for epic fury replenishment. It is to fund the hydraulic shield. The statecraft here is clear. The U.S. is pledging to utilize every Golden Dome asset and every Navy engineer to protect and repair the Gulf's water infrastructure. But there is a catch. This $45 billion is being carved out of domestic efficiency savings. We are watching a zero-sum statecraft where the water security of Riyadh is being prioritized over the infrastructure of the American heartland. The mutual decision and the Israeli green light. We must also analyze the mutual war doctrine. President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu spoke late last night, reaffirming that the decision to halt strikes on Iran will be a mutual one. In the world of power, this means the red lines are no longer drawn in Washington alone. By giving Israel a co-equal vote on the end of the conflict, the U.S. is signaling a total alignment that makes a diplomatic off-ramp nearly impossible. This is bonded statecraft, where two nuclear-capable allies have tied their political destinies to the unconditional surrender of the Mojtaba regime, the M-Bridge threat, and the financial counter-siege. While the missiles fly, the real power move is happening in the digital space. China and Russia have officially invited the water-stressed nations of the Gulf to join the M-Bridge digital currency platform to bypass U.S. sanctions. The statecraft of Beijing is opportunistic neutrality. They are positioning themselves as the only power that can provide sanction-proof trade, while the U.S. is distracted by the kinetic war. If the Gulf nations begin to move their oil and water trade into the petro-yuan, the U.S. dollar's status as a global weapon of state will be fundamentally compromised. The Donroe Doctrine in the Americas. As the Doral Summit in Miami concludes today, we are seeing the application of hydraulic statecraft in our own hemisphere. Part of the Shield of the Americas Pact includes a U.S. guarantee for water security in Mexico and Central America, provided they join the counter-cartel coalition. The administration is essentially saying, we will secure your resources, but only if you secure our borders. This is resource imperialism for the 2020s. We are leveraging our technology and our military to create a self-contained U.S.-led fortress that can survive the chaos of the Middle East, the succession risk in Tehran. Inside Tehran, the statecraft is one of terror and unity. Mojtaba Khamenei is utilizing the hydraulic siege to frame the U.S. and Israel as enemies of humanity. By claiming that the U.S. set the precedent by striking the Keshem Island desalination plant last week, Mojtaba is radicalizing the Iranian population. For power and statecraft, the question is whether a decapitated regime can be replaced by anything other than a revenge state. If Mojtaba's gambit works and the Gulf allies panic, the U.S. will be forced into a sustained occupation that will drain our resources for decades. The Golden Dome and the psychological war. Strategy is also about the fortress of the mind. The administration's focus on the Golden Dome is designed to convince the American public that this war has no domestic blood price. By showing high-tech intercepts over the Gulf, the White House is manufacturing a sense of strategic immunity. But the $120 oil price and the $45 billion supplemental are the economic blood of the conflict. The statecraft of the next 30 days will be to hide the economic cost behind the military glory. If the public starts to feel the water war inflation more than the pride of the Golden Dome, the consensus will break. The end of neutrality, the pick a sphere doctrine. Finally, we must address the end of the middle ground. In the world of March 10th, 2026, every nation from India to Brazil is being forced to pick a sphere. The U.S. is utilizing loyalty benchmarks to determine which nations get military aid and which get security tariffs. This is the algorithmic statecraft of the Trump era. Power is no longer about diplomacy. It is about compliance. If you are not part of the shield, you are part of the jungle. Conclusion, the state of the global siege. As of this afternoon, the Pax Americana has been replaced by a Pax Trumpiana of high-intensity management. The hydraulic siege in the Gulf is the testing ground for this new world. If the U.S. can keep the water flowing in the Gulf while keeping the fortress secure at home, the Donroe Doctrine will be the blueprint for the rest of the century. If not, the Tuesday terror in the markets is just the beginning of a total global realignment. Power and statecraft will be tracking the congressional vote on the $45 billion supplemental tonight.